Okay, so actually, these are our housekeeping rules. Your microphone will be muted at all time, and today's webinar is recorded, and the cloud recording will be posted on the Switch Asia website. During the sessions, you can type your question in the chat and the Q&A box. At the end of each panel discussion, you will have about 5 to 10 minutes for extensive Q&A. If you like to speak, you can press a button to raise your hand. A host will grant you access to address your point. Okay, right. Next page, please. And let me bring you to today's program. We will start with an introduction of the webinar, followed by a short technical inputs on the green public procurement, a strategic lever for net zero transitions. And then we move on to today's highlight, where we have two panel discussions. The first one will be about leveraging green public procurement for net zero transition from policy to practices. And the second one will be about how to account the GPP contributions on net zero transition. And we will finish the day off with the concluding remarks. And now let me introduce you about our chair, co-chair, moderator of the panel discussion. They are a team from Switch Asia Policy Support Component. Our chairperson, Sinaida Fadiva, the team leader. Co-chair, Sanjay Kumar, senior GPP expert. Elodie Mariasu, she will be the moderator for panel discussion 1. She is the key expert. And last but not least, we have Lanjakon Pratumrat. Today, she serves as the moderator of the panel discussion 2. She is the GPP expert. And now I would like to start with Elodie on behalf of our chairperson. Could you share us how the Switch Asia mainstream the GPP in the region, and how GPP could be used as a vital tool to combat the climate change and promote a transition to net zero? Elodie, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nan. Thank you for this introduction. So Switch Asia is very active in green public procurement. Our mandate is really to work across sustainable consumption and production. And as you may know, sustainable consumption and production is the 12th Sustainable Development Goal, and GPP is a core part of SDG 12. And it's usually referred to as sustainable public procurement, but really the idea is that if we are to change markets, we are to buy green products, green services, and the first buyer of the world is often a government, or the country is the government. And we see it in our work directly through GPP, through this leg of our work, but also in our climate work, we see it very clearly. So across regions, sub-regions in Asia, we have analyzed climate policies such as the nationally determined contributions, the NDCs, and we've been in close discussions with governments of national governments in Asia to try really to look how can we increase maximize this net zero transition? How can we make it happen? And often the most direct solution, the one where they feel they have control, is green public procurement. They feel they can reach their climate goals, these Asian governments, and also the private sector, by buying green, by making sure that the roads that are built, the schools that are built, the hospitals, the medication has an angle of sustainability, whether it's by reducing waste or having more sustainable cement. They see that this is a clear, obvious ticket. However, it's not very easy to do in practice. It needs a lot of people to come together from different worlds. You imagine the green people and more the finance people, they have to come together and find the solution. So this is what this webinar is a little bit about, is to bring people together to discuss the barriers and the solutions. So on these words, very introductory, I'd like to pass the floor back to our moderator, Dr. Nan.
Yes, thank you very much, Elodie, for a nice introduction. And now I would like to ask our senior GPP expert, Sanjay, to just give us some insight how GPP can be used as a strategic lever for net zero transition. Sanjay, over to you.
Thank you, Nan. Thank you very much. And thank you, the CHSIA, for giving the opportunity to speak on this subject. Can we go to the slide? Thank you, Lodi, for making a case for the GPP, how government could, give a signal to the market by, demanding sustainable product and services or the works wherever the and as we know, the government across the world, they spend a huge amount of money. Roughly, it accounts for roughly about 13 to 14% of the GDP. They spend on procurement of goods, works, and services. And procurement happens at all places, right? It happens at the national level, it happens at the provincial level, it happens at the municipal levels. And surprisingly, it also has an impact on GHG emissions. And according to estimate by the World Economic Forum, it's roughly about 15% of the global GHG emissions. So this is a huge. And where does this emissions are coming from, right? So if you look at the 6 sectors where the government spend, right? The 6 sectors being the defense, construction, waste management, industry, utilities, right, transport, they constitute roughly about 70% of the emission which is happening as a result of government procurement decisions. So the scale in this, can we enter the slide? Yes, and one more. Yes. So if you look at then the scale, a scale that is 13 to 14% of the GDP and a scope which is happening in different sectors, right? That makes it a very powerful tool, right? To drive, the government ambitions to address the climate change and mitigate some of these goals. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yes. So little bit of the terminology. I know many of you are already aware of it. Like as per the terminology, there are 3 kind of emission: scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. Previous slide, please. Yeah. So scope 1 emission is as a result of activities happening within the company premises. Scope 2 is the emission which are coming from the electricity which any organization they buy from, whether from the solar, whether from the fossil fuel, and so on. And scope 3, is happening as a result of all the, upstream and downstream activities in the supply chain, right? And it has been estimated that, the emissions which are coming from the supply chain, right? That is roughly about 11 times more than the company's direct emissions, right? So that also gives another, signal why public procurement is a great tool to address the climate change and can mitigate the climate change impact. Because procurement is the one which controls the supply chain activities, and they have a power to do so using their procurement spend. Next slide, please. So GPP, has been happening. It's not a new subject. It's there around, almost 20, 30 years now. And yeah, enter please. So lot of changes and shift has been happening from, the cost to the value, because, and, there are many governments who have been aligning their procurement policy with the climate change goals. And uh, changes are also happening in the methodology. How do you evaluate, when you want to take the climate consideration in the public procurement decision? So in that aspect, many of the, the government, or the multilateral agencies have revised their procurement regulations to take those into account. For example, European Union has the MEET methodology for the biodiversity. World Bank has come up with the 8 criteria. Asian Development Bank has come up with the multi-point criteria. All this methodology, gives opportunity to take into non-price factors like carbon into the decision making. And since carbon needs to be taken into account, into the decision making for addressing the climate change goals, right? Then a lot of activities happening here as well, because if it has to be taken into decision making, it needs to be compared, right? And it needs to be evaluated in a transparent way, right? So here also, lots is happening. And then, uh, governments are coming up with a new tool, to assist the procurement professional, to take into account carbon pricing or carbon into the decision making, right? One of the permanent tool is CO2 performance ladder, which was developed in Netherlands, but now it is being, adopted in other countries as well. For example, France has adopted, UK, Germany, Ireland, and so on. So changes are happening, but is it happening at a scale? Right. Here, I want to say that the current GPP policy or the strategy, right, they are not able to, the government is not able to fully make use of this effective policy tool which the government has to address the climate mitigation, and lot needs to be done. So next slide, please. So where do we go from here, right? As I said, like a lot of things are happening, and you have the best practices in the region also, and in other parts of the world also. For example, Japan, came up with the Green Contract Act in 2017, which, permits the use of taking into account the carbon pricing into the procurement decisions. Then European Union has GPP criteria for the several products, which takes into account the life cycle impact of into the decision making. The Canada has, Germany, UK, and many other countries are happening. But there are also, the common challenges, common barriers, right? For example, we need to do a lot of capacity building, upscaling the public procurement capacity to take into account the carbon into the decision making. There are, issues related to the data on life cycle analysis, EPDs, and so on, fear of legal challenges. So these are there, right? But if we truly want, to make GPP and mainstream to address the climate change goals, and we want to re-establish the trust in the government ability to address climate change by making effective use of green public procurement for climate mitigation, then we need to collaborate in addressing some of these common barriers and making use of the best practices which is happening across the globe. We can do it by, exchanging knowledge, saying data, good practices, and building a community of practitioners, right, to mainstream GPP for addressing the climate goals. So I will end, here, because we have excellent panel of speakers coming from different background, from the academia, business association, industry, and so on. So I will stop here, Nan, and thank you very much.
Yes.
Let's go to the panel discussion. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, thank you very much, Sanjay, for a nice capture, and also just, give us like the intro and set the scene for the next panel discussion. So now let me bring you to the first panel discussion, leveraging green public procurement for net zero transition from policy to practices. I'm delighted to introduce you our panelists. First, we have Professor Ferhat Karaka from School of Engineering and Digital Science, Nazarbayev University, Kazakhstan. Next, Dr. Vanchalerm Charothon, Chair of Working Groups on Sustainability. And last but not least, we also have Ms. Helena O'Rourke-Potopsky, procurement expert at ICLEI Europe. So this session will be moderated by Elodie Maria Soup, key expert from the Switch Asia Policy Support component. So please be reminded to type any question that you have in the chat box, and then we will just come to the Q&A right after the panel discussion. So now over to you, Elodie.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nan, for this introduction. And it's really a pleasure to be with these three panelists and to dive into the topic with you. So first, I would like to ask a few questions to Dr. Ferhat Karaka. And if you could enlighten us, Dr. Karaka, more from a global perspective of your view on how GPP can play a role to really support the net zero transition. And maybe if you could add to that as well, what are the primary barriers encountered and how can they be addressed?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Elodie, for inviting me on the stage. So actually, you just addressed that a global perspective. Anyway, I am going to provide some insights and ideas from my own perspective, but it will be better to highlight it at this moment that it is mostly related to construction sector, as I am an expert in construction sector, and also I am based in Central Asia. So this is not only for Central Asia, but I mean, the audience can think that the barriers now I am going to highlight is mostly related to the countries with the context of just starting or initiating green public procurement implementations in their country context. So this is actually a kind of perspective I'm going to provide. So let's start me with the first and most critical gap. It is about policy and practice, between policy and practice. For instance, as I said that I am based in Kazakhstan, it is one of the leading countries in Central Asia, and fast developing, and construction sector is very dynamic, and it shares a big GDP in the country level. So I will say that it is quite progressive and ambitious on paper. In terms of sustainability goals, circular economy implementations, and also even green public procurement. However, when you look at the real procurement applications in the public sector, you will see that there's a significant gap between the ambition on the paper and the practice. I think it is the same in many countries because it requires it has a lot of opposers, or let's say barriers, to make such an implementation in country level. So it should be highlighted that here the main barrier in terms of policy and practice is not the will or lack of will. It is exist. They want it, but the main barrier is related to practical enablers. They don't exist. Okay, I will provide details on this. Maybe it could be interesting to provide a kind of a real-time example to picturize it. For instance, it's a typical problem of building stocks in Central Asia that comes from old Soviet times. And they are now at the moment of reaching their end of life. And all those building stocks are now, I mean, the local managements or even national level management, not only in Central Asia, in many places, they are making the plans how to manage them for the future. Some of them are planning to demolish them. Some of them are planning to renovate them to extend their lifetime. And there are implementation exist. People are discussing. But here, for instance, if there is a kind of demolition process, there is almost no established regulations how they will go back into the construction sector as a part of green public procurement after a recycling procedure, like a kind of secondary materials. So these are some practical implementations to highlight that what kind of problems we are having and experiencing. The second main barrier is, as far as I am experiencing and communicating with the stakeholders from every stage, from contractors to government level, it seems that it is material availability. Actually, Sanjay addressed very well as one of the barrier as capacity development. So the availability of the materials and maybe the industry supporting green public procurement is a key issue. And it seems that is one of the main barriers we have in developing countries, or the countries just planning or starting to make implementation for the green public procurement procedures. The certification of the materials is also related to material availability. Maybe some materials are available, but certification process of their, usability in the life cycle, from the life cycle perspective of any construction process is missing. The second, maybe the third barrier that I should highlight is market maturity. So I will say that the countries in Central Asia, maybe it is the same for many developing countries, they are quite dependent on imports for high quality materials. In construction sector, we like to call them as finishing materials. Finishing materials are mostly high value and high quality materials. They are expensive, and they require an established industry to produce them in locally or nationally, and all those countries are suffering from such production lines. So that's why there's a big reliance on import, and this is another problem in the implementation of GPP. It could be also a kind of advantage, or a kind of maybe opportunity if it is managed well, because you have the full control of imports in terms of the regulations based on your GPP criteria, then that can be also handled as an advantage in the application stage. Institutional knowledge gap is also very critical. So what I like to say here that the public authorities often lack of knowledge on technical expertise to design proper tenders according to global GPP criteria. So that means that there should be a strong support from the experienced bodies like international organizations like Switch Asia to support the governments to develop their policies and regulations and the systems to follow up and to fill that gap, the knowledge gap, institutional gap. At the end of my discussions, by highlighting the barriers, I think I should anyway, it is also critical to address that, how they can be managed. So what I am thinking that one of the most critical things is that we should stimulate market through demand aggregation. It means that it is a high priority to start some state-led pilot projects, which were also advised or monitored or consulted by the international organizations. And also we should establish a clear certification pathway for recycled or secondary materials and how they can be certified and used in the process. Also, I think this is also very important, and I have experience not only Central Asia, I worked and also in many other countries, even developed countries all over the world. So I think you are aware of that. At this early stage of such implementations, some countries or some sectors can experience greenwashing issue. Okay, so it requires a good training and guidance for procurement officers to avoid greenwashing that establish faster than proper applications in the sector. So these are my highlights.
Yes.
I think.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karata. Yes, I like the ideas of state-led pilots, also standards, and I also hear you when you say the risk of greenwashing. And I know I should have said that you are a construction expert when introducing you. So this really applies to construction, but also to other sectors. It's quite cross-cutting. And now, after hearing from you for these great insights, I'd like to hear from Dr. Wonchalon from the Thailand cement industry. From your perspective, Dr. Wonchalom Chaludon, what is the net zero plan for the Thai cement industry, and what role can GPP play in really supporting that net zero plan?
Yep. Thank you, Elodie. basically as a background, so Thai cement industry has worked together often under Thai Cement Manufacturer Association and along with working as individual company as well in terms of driving for decarbonization effort for several years now. And basically we have also working together with Thai Concrete Association to develop the Thailand Cement and Concrete Net Zero Roadmap 2050 with the support from GCCA or Global Cement and Concrete Association as well. And it's clear that we have basically 7 levers that we determine that would be the key driver for our net zero or decarbonization initiatives. And basically these levers actually looking into the aspect of cement and concrete industry, starting from the design and construction, efficiency in design and construction, looking into how can we be more efficient in the carbon concrete production, and also in terms of carbon footprint reduction of our cement binders and also our clinker, as well as looking into the new technology that will be coming on and play key roles, for example, CCUS. So coming back to your question that what is the role of green public procurement or GPP policy and mechanism, I think it can play really a major role in many of our levers. Just for example, talking about efficiency in design and construction, I think it is clear that if the project is looking for low carbon or sustainable project, that would be the first criteria that also help drive our initiatives in terms of creating the demand for low carbon material, whether it's low carbon cement and concrete. And also it's also important to look, I think in my view, not only embody carbon in the material, but also looking at the life cycle of the project as well. And that's when the durability aspect of the cement and concrete solution will come in and plays a key role as well. So in terms of the other levers, if I talk about the concrete production, I think clearly because roughly, for example, in Thailand, I think roughly 40 or 50% of our construction is in infrastructure segment. So GPP can play a stimulus as a low carbon concrete demand to create that demand, and also the demand for performance-based concrete rather than prescriptive based, where we specify the performance of the concrete in terms of the mechanical property, in terms of durability, and also in terms of carbon footprint of the product, rather than only the prescriptive base, where we, for example, determine only the minimum cement content. I think also we have touched upon how we can really transparently declare our environmental performance. So we've discussed about EPD, and I think this is one of the tools that is really important that we use it to drive forward in this area of cement and concrete. The other levers that I think will have the clear impact on GPP is the carbon footprint reduction of our cement. For example, in this past few years, we have worked a lot in Thailand in trying to move away from ordinary Portland cement, which is naturally have a higher carbon footprint, into the low carbon cement types. In Thailand, we call it hydraulic cement. And in the start, we actually struggle a little bit in the first phase in terms of introducing this low carbon cement into the market. But the key is when we working together amongst all key stakeholders, for example, government organizations, government specifiers, the third-party organization, professional organizations, it's actually required to work together to drive the initiative forward. So basically, instead of having a 20%, 30% conversion rate of low carbon cement, now we have like 80%, 90% of conversion rate. So the point that I would like to highlight here is that the role of government specification to allow the use of a low carbon cement, a low carbon concrete, low carbon product in terms of construction material is really important in driving the initiative forward. And then also not only for the government or public project, but also it actually cascade, creating the demand for similar demand for the private sector as well. Yep. So that would be more or less sum up kind of my first thought on the situation in Thailand.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wonchalaln. It's fascinating to hear about the dialogue you have with the government on this and how it's driving like really the research for new products that really embody innovation. So I like to hear about that, especially in Southeast Asia.
Okay.
And now I'd like to turn to Miss Elena O'Rourke-Potoki and to hear from you, Helena, about what are the primary barriers encountered to really make GPP work, and how can they be addressed? And it'd be great to hear your examples from Europe, as you represent ICLEI Europe.
Thanks a lot, Elodie, and thank you for this invitation. So I work for ICLEI Europe, so we're a network of cities. But also ICLEI works globally with about 3,000 cities around the world. So the perspective I want to give today is from the local government perspective. So we see several key challenges when implementing GPP. As Professor Kara said, there's limited capacity and knowledge within public procurers. So public procurers are a function in municipalities and often not trained specifically to do GPP. So they are not always taught or learned to go beyond the price mechanism and compliance to see the broader picture. But this can be addressed through training within the municipalities. So we have the European GPP toolkit with different modules that could be used to train and upskill public procurers. We see in Europe a lot of peer-to-peer exchange network, like the Procure Plus network or the big buyers working together, where public procurers can exchange their knowledge, best practices, and also challenges. And what we've seen that works well in some cases is, for example, in the city of Malmö, the public procurer was paired up with a expert in the accessibility department when tendering for second-hand furniture, and their collaboration helped to get the knowledge from the environmental department into procurement. So having more cross-departmental collaboration works quite well in small or big, large tenders. And what we really need, and is still lacking everywhere in the world, as far as we can see, is a professionalization of public procurers. They're not getting the recognition that they need as a important role for society. We have seen some examples in Malta, Estonia, and Portugal, where there are efforts to train and have certification for public procurers, but this is very far from being recognized at the same level as being a doctor or a lawyer in society. Another challenge that we see is balancing the short-term costs versus the long-term benefits. So often we have a procurement, it's urgent, and there's a cost that needs to be paid now. But public procurers are not trained to look at the whole life cycle costing. So what we at ICLEI are pushing for is to have more compulsory use of life cycle costing and environmental carbon footprinting to look at from the purchase to the end of contract, looking at the impact of a purchase. And seeing whether you deliver value for money over time versus the upfront costs. So we have seen this in the Supreme Audit Office of the Czech Republic. When they created their first headquarters in Prague, they used this life cycle study to look at whether the project was going to be more sustainable and feasible from an economic point of view. So this is used, but it should be made compulsory for some tenders above a certain thresholds economy or the largest construction or infrastructure projects. Another concern that we see is that There's this misconception that the market is not always ready, or that if you have too ambitious criterias, that you have the risk of single bidding, and this is something that is against our EU rules and competition, and the European Court of Auditors will follow up on this. But what we see that works well in practice is to have upfront consultation with the market. For the city of Nyon, a small city in France, they wanted to use their furniture and do a closed loop. So asking the suppliers to take their old furniture to transform them to new standards using the materials of the furniture they already had, which was quite an unusual contract. And the city approached the market, discussed these, see if this was economically feasible, and this was done because they sort of looked at what different suppliers were able to do, and the contract was realizable and achievable. In another vein, the city of Amsterdam developed a circular economy strategy with different goals per year of how many percentage of their contracts they want to have circular criteria. So this gives long-term predictability to the market, so they can see that in 5 years' time, the 20% of their tenders would be having circular criteria, and in 2 years later, 50%. And having this long-term view and sort of knowing how the level of ambition will increase helps SMEs to get prepared for these. And last but not least, one challenge is the lack of sort of political will and institutional inertia. We often do things because we've always done this way. You might have staff saying we can do this another way, and the boss or the head of the department will say, no, this is too much risk, or this maybe pushback. And I guess there's also this misconception that GPP could lead to higher costs or be outside the legal framework, which is not in the case in Europe. One way to address this is to have stronger leadership and more, again, cross-departmental collaboration. The small city of Tastrup in Denmark created this cross-departmental working group on sustainability. So the different departments could discuss the different challenges that they do on sustainability, including public procurement, and collaborate in this more holistic way to address their challenges. And this has helped to develop some of their strategies. So I think these solutions are clear. We need more professionalization and capacity building, using more life cycle costing and total value methods, engage the market upfront and transparently, and anchor GPP in different policy areas, and thinking of it as a strategic tool that can achieve several goals at the same time. So I'll stop here, but
thank you so much, Helena. I really like to hear all your practical examples from all these cities across Europe. And really, it seems that the solutions are there. It's just that people need to maybe have a little bit more support and a little bit more training and a little bit more positive political environment, and they can make it happen. They can find a nice solution that fits their needs and is more sustainable at the same time. So I will try to ask a second round of questions, but rather brief for the answers, if you can, maybe to react on each other's also first round of interventions. Dr. Fahad, really briefly, if you can, what are the conditions that the private sector requires to really engage effectively in GPP? And maybe the other interventions have already answered partially this question.
Okay, thank you, Elodie. So actually, it's a little bit challenging question, but I like to try to address as much as possible, again, with the limitations of my knowledge. The first thing I think should be addressed here is readiness. If they are not ready, you cannot do that. And we have done a kind of cost and benefit analysis all over the world. by collecting opinions from stakeholders from the sector, construction sector. And the results turn into that it doesn't make a big difference from place to place. But it seems that construction sector players, as contractors, for instance, they are mostly motivated with cost, immediate cost, and the benefits. So they don't have a kind of longer, I mean, or bigger understanding of the bigger picture in terms of life cycle assessment. So it should be somehow directed and forced maybe at the beginning. So I will say that the private sector is not yet fully ready for such a full-scale applications in green public procurement, especially in Central Asia. As I said, that they are mostly motivated now for the immediate income or cost or benefit from the projects. However, there are some willingness out there. Many companies are seeing that this could be an opportunity to produce high-quality products, but structural conditions are missing. In order to make this discussion, I mean, in terms of readiness, I'd like to give one example that we had. There was an expo several years ago in Astana, the center of Kazakhstan, capital city of Kazakhstan. And because of the expo, there was a kind of wave of green certification for the buildings. And most of the buildings certified I mean, in the country, in the city, happened during that time. It was the main driver, and there was an enforcement for the buildings. They are going to support facilitations for the expo activities in the country, in the city. So green certification was like a kind of very popular at that time. But after the expo, it just stopped mostly. So this is an interesting example. What I am saying that even though the private sector seems not ready, still it is possible to implement or activate them by good supportive legislative ground or incentives. And another limitation, I think this is interesting and important, as I highlighted in the previous part, supply side, I mean, supply and demand related limitations. And the country, if not producing good enough or certified materials as a secondary materials or green materials, it's one of the issues. So most of time the companies, for example, or designers, even let's go for a little bit low level. If a designer is supposed to go for a kind of public procurement process for a bidding and tender, and then they are going to complain that, okay, if there is no material available in the market, how we can make a design in that way. So this is another limitation, a practical limitation they are experiencing and reporting. And the cost factor, especially in front cost or investment cost for the green materials or selecting them, is increasing the price of the products a little bit. This seems as is a little bit misconception because in a long term they are going to get lots of benefits. It is going to come back as in terms of reductions in greenhouse gases, even energy consumption, everything. So there are benefits on the table in the long term as a life cycle. I mean, if they consider in the life cycle perspective, but the construction experts, actually, I was also a contractor for many years. I had my company. I know that hat. I mean, when I put that hat as a contractor, mostly in the construction sector, they are interested in the product and the product cost. You know, the operational procedures are not mostly responsibility for the contractor or the producer. That is one of the limitations anyway. So
thank you so much, Fahad. I'm gonna cut you there. It's really fascinating, and it's really interesting to see how one would engage as a private contractor. Thank you very much. I just want to leave enough time for the other panelists.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, please go on.
And
okay.
We have lots of questions, so that's fantastic. And Dr. Wanchalon, I'd like to know from you a little bit how you think GPP can really maximize a net zero transition. And also, you had a question just for you on what is the criteria that can really help you to supply low carbon cement? What do you need to see in a bid to make that happen?
Okay.
If I understood well the question from our friend also from Kazakhstan, Mr. Nurgali.
All right, so I'll try to address both. And I think on the first question on thinking in terms of my opinion in cement industry, GPP really, again, can play a crucial role, pivotal role in steering the policy and enacting change for the greener future, including environmental requirements in procurement process. So I think conceptually, it's all about putting prioritization of low carbon footprint performance over the lower price in the procurement criteria. So for me, that's one of the things that I think that's how role of GPP can maximize in terms of supporting the industry, particularly cement industry in reaching net zero. Green building code also, if we can specify the clear environmental criteria, including for low carbon construction material, I think that would be helpful as well in not only directly stimulate the demand for low carbon cement and concrete or low carbon construction material in the government project, but also in the private sector as well. So I think this aspect is also important. The other one that I think is essential is the application of various incentives and also recognition, basically to really encourage the adoption of green materials, for example, in terms of financial benefits like certain tax breaks, subsidies, rebates, as well as non-financial reward, for example, recognition for both for all players in the value chain, designer, contractor, and also material suppliers. So I think these are a few things that comes to mind. But overall, I think it's important that in terms of to develop the GPP strategies and mechanism, it has to be done actually by both collaboration amongst the both public and private sector to understand each other limitation. And then I think if we collaborate together, this will go a long way. And talking about collaboration, it's not just talking together, but it's essentially having collaborative mindset, that this is our common goal, having collaborative actions, taking the step together, small step by step, and then in the end, having shared collaborative value. I think this is really important. And basically, just to address the specific question, so from my view, I think it can be done in several ways in terms of how do we specify the low carbon cement and concrete product into the project. For example, it can be done by let's say, for example, in Thailand, we have the performance-based cement standard as opposed to conventional prescriptive standard. So one way is to choose to specify it as by standard. So it's everyone is also on the even ground in terms of the what supplier can supply. Also, you can specify it by, for example, using eco labels or specified by perhaps measuring directly the carbon footprint of such products. I think that would also be one of the ways to classify it. But importantly, in order to do that, we would have to have the transparent environmental performance for the products that we are to apply. For example, E3D, I think is a great tool. For certain countries, like in Thailand, we also have local green certificates for cement. So that would be one of other tools as well that the procurement can choose. And in the end, once we have that criteria set and can be measured transparently, I think it's also would be beneficial to actually have, let's say, extra point or incentives for those who have better performance environmentally. Yep.
Thank you so much,
that's
Dr.
all from me.
Wongchulon.
Thank you.
Yes, that's very enlightening, and I think it will be useful for the work that's going on at the moment in Kazakhstan, so most helpful. And now I'd like to ask the last question to our last panelist for this first part of our webinar, to Helena. From, in your view, how can the impact of GPP be really maximized for the net zero transition?
So I would start by saying, like, every purchase made by government is a decision about the future that the government wants to do and what kind of society they want. So through public procurement or green public procurement, we can choose a future that is a net zero, circular, enriching biodiversity while meeting the needs of citizens. So, it's also by making this decision from that front and what are the expected outcomes that you want to see. But there are other tools that can help this transition to net zero. So, like I said in my previous introduction, was to link public procurement to broader climate, circular, or biodiversity goals and really look at this holistically. So one concrete example, we see that the province of Zeeland in the Netherlands used the SDGs as a compass to guide their sustainable public procurement strategy, and looking at this holistically, that you're not just buying for the sake of spending a budget, but it's also to tackle climate change or life online or tackling biodiversity loss in a holistic way. I would say that there are different EU strategies that are coming, like the Industrial Decarbonization Accelerator Act, or IDA, or the upcoming Circular Economy Act, that have these implications for GPP. So looking holistically across all of government, how can public procurement support these goals? I would prioritize circular economy or life cycle approaches to look holistically at what you're buying and what impact it will have on the long term. One concrete example of this is in Paris. They renovated this house or building called La Maison des Canaux, where they asked to have 50% recycled and bio-based materials in the construction of this building. So you can have these in the specification and require to close these loops by bidders. It's technically possible on the market. I would also look at the biodiversity aspect, and governments can't procure biodiverse solutions or nature-based solutions. So two examples of this, the Lisbon Drainage Action Plan. They are building 2 tunnels under the city of Lisbon to remove floodwaters from low-lying areas into the river next to it to prevent floods and killing of people due to floods. And one of their tender specification is to where they have to dig up the soil, they have to replant with local species and protect the environment and restore nature, so the construction sites has the most limited impact. And the other one is the region of Lazio in Italy. They decided to procure a tree per inhabitant, so they procured 6 million trees to plant and regenerate nature around the region. So you can directly have an impact on biodiversity and nature restorations. And last but not least is we see in Europe and other places these pilots that a government or a municipality has used a green public procurement approach, but these are limited pilots. I would say that we need to go from pilot to scaling up and mainstreaming this approach. One example of this is the city of Oslo. They piloted an approach on the zero construction sites where they use electronic machinery to do construction. But they decided that this is going to be the norm in every of their construction project to really scale up the thing. So having, again, this government push and policy push to say that this is the default approach that should be used. So I would say ultimately it's about embedding this approach holistically to make sure that every euro or dollar is spent on net zero transition or zero waste solutions.
Thank you so much, Helena, for all these examples too. You're generating a lot of interest among our listeners. So you have a question for you in the chat, and I would invite you to answer it in the chat itself about is there really an understanding in Europe about the difference from the practitioners, the difference between circular criteria and low carbon criteria. And also to all the panelists, there's interest in getting more documents and more examples. So if you want to put in the chat links to your work, please do, especially Helena, to the EU GBP help desk. I think that would be of interest to some of our participants. So thank you so much, everyone, for all of your answers. Fahad, I'm sorry I interrupted you. It was very, very interesting. So many people are asking questions, and please continue to interact in the chat. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much. I also find myself that it is such a constructive exchange. So, but anyhow, we also need to move to the next panel discussion where we think that it is also important. So the next panel discussion will be about how to account the GPP contributions to the net zero transition. And it is my pleasure to introduce you our three panelists. First, Isabella Low, Chairman at the Singapore Environment Council. Second, we have Jana Pasca, Head of Policy at the Global Cement and Concrete Association. And also we have Joe Phelan, Executive Director, Asia Pacific WBCSD. And this session will be moderated by Lanchakorn Prathumrat, the GPP expert from Switch Asia. So now, Lanchakorn, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Nan, for the introduction. In the previous panel, we heard about GPP support and the net zero transition, barriers to the implementation, and the private sector readiness. In this section, we will step further to focus on how to account for the contribution of GPP to net zero. And I'm delighted to be joined by Isabella, Jana, and Joe. Let's start with the basics, which is about the tools. If we want to measure GPP's contribution to net zero, what frameworks or methodologies are available and how effective are they? First question to Jana. Since the Global Cement and Concrete Association has been leading the sectoral roadmaps for cement and concrete, could you please start by giving us an overview of the frameworks or methodologies that are commonly used to account for GHG reductions from the procurement and what you see as their strengths and limitations?
Thank you. Good morning and good evening to everyone. So thanks for introduction. I represent the Global Cement and Concrete Association, as has been said, and we are a global industry association promoting the sustainable use of cement and concrete materials. Our agenda is focused on decarbonization and innovation. We have a number of major players in cement and concrete industry. In addition to that, in our network, we have also national association partners such as TCMA as well. And in a few years ago, we published our net zero roadmap for cement and concrete, 2050 net zero roadmap for cement and concrete, where we outline actually what we need to do now collectively. So what are the sort of policy and technology levers to decarbonize our industry by 2050? It's a set of policy and policy asks, and also recommendations on a sort of innovation, finance, and technology front to really mobilize our efforts and accelerate decarbonization in our industry. And low carbon procurement is actually one of the levers or one of the key aspects that we highlight in our roadmap that we really need to mobilize and activate to really get us to net zero in next years. And that brings me actually to tell you a little bit more about the green public procurement and its benefits, and also obviously accounting frameworks that are very much needed. So in our industry, as you probably know, cement and concrete is one of the high emitters. We account for globally, I think, for around 7 to 8% of global CO2 emissions. But it's also one of the industries that is working very hard to decarbonize. And we actually were the first industry to formally pledge to decarbonize by 2050. And we do also measure our progress. And green public procurement really has the potential to deliver significant CO2 savings when supported by clear accounting frameworks. And TCMA representative, it was already mentioned here that tools like EPD, so environmental product declarations, make it really possible to measure and compare carbon impacts in a practical way. So what is important is that we need to really embed these approaches into procurement. So public authorities, actually governments can lead by example, stimulate innovation in low carbon technologies, and more importantly, actually accelerate the transition to more sustainable infrastructure. Why we see the criticality of EPDs in green public procurement? For a number of reasons. They have already been standardized, and there is existing infrastructure to deliver EPDs, right? So they are third-party verified. There are programs. There is software for it, and it's already developed and also readily. It's ready to be scaled across other geographies as well. And every EPD has also an indicator for carbon footprint. In addition to that, I also wanted to mention, in reference to low carbon procurement, yes, definitely it needs to be supported and spearheaded and led by public authorities, by governments, but by government agencies that have because in our industry, the government is actually the sort of main buyer of our products. It can vary, obviously, depending on a country to country, but it's anywhere between 50 to 70% of our products, of our materials are bought by government. So there's a significant number. So really that signal needs to be created by government. That's one sort of part of the picture. And again, it has already probably been mentioned here, but it's very important also that the building standards are updated to permit low and near zero carbon products to be specified. Because what we often see, there is a disconnect between low carbon, green public procurement specifications and building standards, right? So we need more sort of collaboration and coordination between different government departments, the ones that are working on public procurement, and those government departments or regulators that are actually setting building standards. The building standards need to be updated with the latest low carbon cement and concrete specifications. There needs to be also harmonization of sort of global approaches to define what low carbon and near zero carbon actually is. So earlier this year, actually, GCCA launched its low carbon ratings to address these challenges. And we publish our low carbon ratings for cement and concrete that is actually building upon the IEA definitions and have been developed in consultation with some of the international institutions such as IDDI, and also obviously in consultation with industry stakeholders and wider community. So it's really the effort to provide a harmonized industry approach to low carbon, to defining low carbon standards, but also taking into the consideration that what the low carbon is and how it's measured can vary from country to country. So the rating systems help measure and benchmark the carbon performance of cement and concrete, and ratings actually provide a practical framework for industry and public procurement authorities to identify low carbon solutions. Just to give you a little bit background to ratings, we actually use very simple visual system. So it's recognizable with a visual graphic that goes from A to G, but it can be replaced with star rating depending on country's preferences. And it's ready for adoption, but it can be also adaptable to local nuances. So the framework allows that country adaptation if local carbon accounting differs from global forms. and uses EPDs. Important, I think, to mention here. So for public procurement, really, the GCCA low carbon ratings is really valuable because it allows those contracting authorities to set clear expectations for suppliers, but also assess bids on verified carbon performance. And really can also reward, obviously, innovation. It has been already mentioned here. We need to sort of reward those that really invest into decarbonization. If you, by adopting these ratings, obviously tender authorities cannot not only can contribute to CO2 reductions, but also can create clear green signal, signal demand for greener products. So that's when it comes to actually accounting frameworks. They are really important when it comes to obviously green public procurement, because we need to have sort of set of standards that is verified and transparent. So I think those are the key messages that I wanted to deliver. And another one is that we need to have some sort of coordination between obviously those specification of low carbon products, but also building codes. And the basis of building resilient built environment need to be based on a whole life project and a whole life cycle as well. Yeah, so thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jana. Regarding the low carbon rating, maybe I would like to ask you to share in the chat to our audience to reach to that tool. So they would be very, very useful. Thank you very much. And I want to ask Joe from the business side, how do companies use these frameworks in the practice, and what benefits and challenges do they encounter?
Thanks very much, Kun Lunchakorn. My name's Joe. I'm with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and it's a privilege to be on this call with you at Switch Asia. We're a community of leading global companies, more than 250, who work together to make sustainability performance a driver of competitiveness. And in our membership are more than 50 companies from Asia, including our good friends at SCG in the cement sector out of Thailand. We as a community, we're working towards tackling climate change, restoring nature, and creating a more equitable society. And we're really focused on action, implementation, and business value. And what we understand exactly, as I think as Mr. Kumar said earlier on, what we understand is that this is largely a supply chain problem. So if you are indeed a cement company, even though most of the emissions are under your direct control, you need your downstream procurers, and then the way that cement and concrete get used and turned into buildings and infrastructure to be aligned with your net zero goals. And for many other organizations, it's upstream in your supply chain. So as a group, we represent about 24% of global corporate revenue and about 26% of global emissions, so around the same as China. And those emissions, about 88% are in what's called scope 3, so value chain emissions, upstream and downstream. And what we understand also as a community, and I'd recommend to everyone on this call, we understand the critical power of demand-side policies to accelerate decarbonisation. Helena made a really powerful case for choosing the kind of society that we want to create through our procurement, and choosing to have a low carbon, restorative and equitable agenda that creates breathable cities, protects water resources, and gives a better quality of life. It also increases competitiveness. And that's where we're focused. And just to say, again, building on some of the points made by Kun Wancharon and others about this is more than green public procurement. So we see on the demand side, first of all, a critical role in green public procurement policies, having net zero carbon criteria in public tenders, including in that a requirement for adopting reliable product carbon footprints to define clear criteria as being essential. But also on the demand side, it's very important that governments create mandates for low carbon products for the market, so beyond their own procurement, but that everyone else in the market, there's mandates in priority sectors. And also, I think it was Kun Wonchakon was saying that there are incentives, again, for priority sectors, there are incentives for people to buy low carbon products. So it's broader than just the green procurement government itself. But when governments introduce green public procurement, what it enables businesses to do is to invest in near zero production capacity. It allows them to test products and validate markets, which is crucial in building business cases. And it also builds the infrastructure for harmonizing standards and for getting quality data. So these are very important systems change that can be created through green public procurement. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Joe. And a follow-up question, as I understand that the World Business Council for Sustainable Development has just polled 300 companies on this needs of the business. Based on the finding, what do business need from the green public procurement to better support the transition to net zero?
Right. So I mentioned green public procurement, which is especially relevant for buildings and infrastructure, for food service procurement and for transport. Mandates, which is also helpful for the chemical sector, for fertilizer, and so on, and also incentives. But more than that, an ecosystem of supportive policies. And these include supply side measures, but also creating chains of custody models. And we've heard a bit on this call about environmental product declarations and also life cycle analysis. And these are critical tools. A couple of tools that we think are really important and are being used by business and can be used in green procurement. One is product carbon footprints, and these are simpler than life cycle analysis, and EPDs have a critical role. But product carbon footprints are the unlock for procurement because they stack up scope 1 and 2 emissions at each stage of the value chain when you're making your procurement decision. So a product carbon footprint is the unlock for getting transparency into carbon transparency into your procurement decisions. And we've developed what is now really the global standard for product carbon footprints. So the World Business Council, along with WRI, co-created and still convene the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is the standard methodology for carbon accounting. The Partnership for Carbon Transparency is a new standard we've developed, which is now the global standard really for supply chain carbon accounting, for procurement carbon accounting. And what it does is 3 things. First of all, it allows the exchange of carbon data at a product level, at the procurement decision level. Second, and it's the global standard for that. It defines the standard for how you calculate that. The second is that product carbon footprint is based on as granular data as possible. So either regionally or nationally specific emissions factors, or where possible, primary emissions data. And what that means is that when you make a decision over who to procure from, or you partner with your supplier to bring down the emissions of the product you're buying, that gets reflected, the engagement you do gets reflected in the product carbon footprint that you buy, and then you can pass on those benefits, or you can understand the lower emissions you're having, but you can also charge a higher premium for it if you're in the private sector, or communicate your decarbonisation if you're in the public sector. So that's the second piece. And what we find is through this methodology, there is on average an 80% difference between a product carbon footprint calculated using this methodology and one using global emission factors. So already it's much more granular. The third thing that the Partnership for Carbon Transparency does, the Partnership for Carbon Transparency, please look it up, is that it comes with APIs that allow this packet of information to be exchanged over any technology platform. Because if you're in procurement, you know that you're using different systems and you're buying from people using different systems, and they're supplying to people using different systems. And it's incredibly complicated to validate and get these pieces of information to speak to each other. So this Partnership for Carbon Transparency has the APIs that allow the exchange, the seamless exchange of data across value chains, and that's what's necessary to scale. So I would encourage everybody to think about product carbon footprints and to go to the Partnership for Carbon Transparency and start asking for them in your procurement decisions and using them to bring in much more transparency and identify your hotspots of where you need to engage.
Thank you, Joe. Very insightful. And we now know what the companies want and suggested. But another important angle is now how can we make the emission reduction visible and credible in practice? The tool often discussed is the eco labels and the carbon labels. So which leads to the question to Isabella. Since you have been working closely with the eco labels and carbon labels, how can these tools help us show or account for the emission reductions that come from the government procurement of these products?
Thank you very much. I've been working on this sector for 17 years now, eco-labels. So I'm also the vice chairman of the Global Eco-Labeling Network, apart from me being the chairman of the Singapore Environment Council. I want to bring back to what Sanjay Kumar had put up, which is very nice numbers, but I have a different number, which is the World Bank statistics, which is close. In fact, the approximate figure was 12% of GDP, national GDP. So that's a substantial number to hold true to the fact that green procurement is extremely important, public procurement. So I also want to go back to Dr. Farhad. Also, I did listen to him. He mentioned about some of the undiscussable things like policy and practice. And I'm going to change his bit a bit more by saying policy to practice to sustaining the nation. And to do that, you need to leverage on the whole public procurement formula. Now, I understand that practicality today, there's a lot of discussion around CBAM, even though nobody wants to talk about it, the cross-border mechanism that has really driven a lot of conversations all over the world concerning how do public procurement actually help in this whole area. So before I jump straight in, I will again qualify. Eco-labels are type 1. In other words, they look at whole life cycle. They look at from the beginning, cradle to grave, and there are voluntary certificates right now for products as well as services to meet the rigorous environmental performance standards internationally recognized under ISO standards. So this is extremely important because Global Eco-Labeling Network that is made up of 39 countries, about 20 who are associate members, we all cover about 60 countries that harmonize all our labels. There was a discussion earlier on about harmonization. We actually harmonize products throughout all our countries through mutual recognition agreements so that we can shortcut through learning in terms of selling products across for any procurement, whether it's for commercial procurement as well as for public procurement. So again, we always advise our people to simplify the tendering. So try not to design complex environmental criteria from scratch. Come on board with our Global Eco-Labeling Network as much as possible so that we can help with all the policy making to reduce the risk by having any so-called independent verification, because that costs money. So I want to also bring back to some of the discussions that was made that is quite important because, again, back to Sanjay Kumar's slide, the whole slate of government procurement doesn't just include buildings. It includes quite a large percentage of utilities. So utilities is a very big touch point in even buildings. As you know, in the developing countries and evolving countries, emerging countries, for some of you when you call out, they are actually going through quite a substantial need to fix their grid. All right, let's talk about electricity and energy in the first place. So even if we introduce innovation, solar panel, and many of the other green undertakings, the first thing that the government have to do is to really look at how to upgrade your existing infrastructure grid to allow innovation and technologies in the green space. That includes green buildings and cement and many of the other good stuff. So these are the first things that we are watching very closely in Singapore, that there needs to be an upgrade, immensely, a huge upgrade, to be able to push for more innovation and technology. I will also go back now back to the support of the policy and alignment. Some of you are policy makers out there. Eco-label actually is important because you'll be able to do green trade among all your countries if you can set the standards equitably and correctly and harmonize across, mapped across. So as you know, Singapore, we're part of ASEAN countries. So across ASEAN, we're already doing it. We're also doing it with Thailand. Various other countries have come to us, including the Philippines. We're going to be signing one in Middle Asia, or you can call it part of Europe, Turkey, soon. So these are prioritizing areas. Energy efficiency is on top of the list. Recyclability and low toxicity of materials is the three basic ingredients to get the eco-labeling going. Now, I have to represent a few countries here. In India, Green Pro actually had demonstrated quite a bit. They didn't limit to just public procurement. In fact, the whole industry had been alive, doing quite substantial building materials, manufacturing and cement and steel production. So again, they have actually put a lot of weight behind it. Likewise, for KET of Korea, they've also come in hard and furious by making public procurement mandatory. And so over the COVID period, they have actually done very good. They have actually gone up something like 5 times in terms of carbon reduction in their country. And they are being able to enable and account for some of the eco labeling specifically, not just to buildings, but many other product lines as well. You can look it up in their website. So we're talking about $2.7 billion worth of green products that are being acquired. And that is significant because the reduction is something like 665,000 tons, sorry. All right, so there are some countries in Asia that are doing the right thing, and something for you to look at as policy making. Other than that, in Singapore, we are obviously all about sustainable finance. So again, the landscape of going for public procurement isn't an isolated item. It is together what we call with the 3 Ps. The 3 Ps would require the private sector to be involved as well. So green financing is another leverage that we use to push for better public procurement, and those questions concerning costs will go away. And more importantly, the people sector. I mean, it's no point just talking about the public and the private sector doing their things without the communities also saying yes to this. So in terms of the sustainable finance area, they are pushing very hard for innovation and impact measurement. So that is where I come in and talk about carbon label as the future. In fact, for the whole of Global Eco-Labeling Network, we're migrating and looking at how to go upstream, which is we're already halfway there, more than 3/4 of the way there. And so carbon label is another very good next so-called piece to enact. And that whole GHG emissions calculation is quite simply now we can actually leverage AI to look at performance. And in fact, we can share that information quite substantially if we can get all the products on board and avoid replication and duplication and non-standards around the world. So AI, again, is a new tool that's just come around the corner. It will be extremely important because it connects up with sustainable finance and innovation and measurement. So again, I'm going to wrap up. Creating the reinforcing cycle. You just talked about the cycle just now. Procurement demand will then cycle into suppliers' decarbonization, will then lead to financiers who will reward and scale up, and that will result in greener products, and that would, of course, engineer or engage the whole idea of green procurement, and that comes with community as well as B2B business. I will step off my soapbox now. Thank you, Lunchakon.
Thank you, Isabella. Thank you for highlighting the importance of the eco labels and the need to the step forward. And now I would like to ask Jana, could you give us one clear but brief example of a good or service or where greenhouse gas emission reduction or saving from the GPP policy can be explicitly accounted?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So there are numerous ways how we can actually account reductions, as I mentioned, in cement productions, and then that translates into GPP. I would like to we sort of, there are a number of ways to do that. Clinker production, that is a critical component of overall cement production, right? It's quite CO2. It's very CO2 intensive, and here savings would come from the using of SCMs, which are supplementary cementitious materials. And some of the countries, they already actually use cementitious materials in their clinker production to reduce their clinker cement ratio or clinker binder ratio in concrete production. And in some countries, that percentage already vary between 30 to 50%, and for some applications, it can even exceed 70%. So cementitious materials, they can really reduce CO2 footprint in cement production, and for some application, the properties of the concrete can be enhanced by use of cementitious materials. So, for example, in durability can be enhanced, and hence service life, and so on. What I'm kind of trying to get at is that in some countries, in some location, there are already well-established standards for the use of cementitious materials, which obviously can increasingly accelerate the uptake of low-carbon cement and concrete in use and even in green public procurement. But in other location, then there are still locations where supplementary cementitious materials use is not optimized, and what is actually hindering, what is obstacle to its enhanced use, are restrictive requirements in standards. How does it sort of play in practice? Construction clients and their contractors, builders, and design teams, they are the ones who specify the construction works and materials. And there are numerous examples where the specification restrict or hinder the use of SMEs in application, and that can be because of lack of awareness, lack of understanding, cooperation, and so on. So just to give you an example of that, in US, there was a sort of infrastructure development where actually the bridge was being built and was going across two countries, and one country actually had that standards for SMEs, the other one didn't have. So this was despite obviously a neighboring state permitting and successfully using blended cement in some highway structures that passed through both states. So yeah, this is just a sort of to give example of lack of coordination. So again, what we need to do in order to really increase the uptake of the cementitious materials, we need to obviously have a construction code. I think I already alluded to that in my first intervention, that must refer by default to the latest actually available material standard. So this sort of connect is very important. And then also ensure that the government and procurement agencies, they really lead in public projects by specifying low carbon cement and concrete through use of blended cements and supplementary cementitious materials, while taking actually into account the whole life carbon and performance of projects. So that's the use of cementitious materials, but that can be done also for the use of CCUS, right, in cement production, where actually we need to take into account CCUS accounting methodology. For example, what is very common practice in cement production, in addition to all these decarbonization levers, is use of alternative fuels. which are actually used to replace fossil fuels, right? So we use the waste, non-recyclable and non-reusable waste to heat actually cement kilns to produce enough energy for clinker production and so on. So those are all sort of, examples how the technologies that are already technologies or low carbon technologies and solutions that are already available in the market and are actively being used in cement productions, and they can be actually incorporated or embodied into green public procurement through recognition, specification, and standards.
Thank you, Janet. Since time is up for us, thank you for the example, and we have one question to Isabella. Has a mechanism for continuous monitoring and reporting on the impact of green public procurement on the carbon footprint of purchased goods and services can be established in Singapore? Could you answer that, please?
That's a good question. I think Joe has put into the group chat already concerning the PACT framework, but that's only for infrastructure. All the other products that we do for global procurement, it is still early stage. We're not like Korea. Korea is way ahead of us. We only started mandatory public procurement for products like office paper, office procurement of paper products. Because of the deforestation that happened in our region, there was a need to make sure that we are actually procuring sustainable paper products, which, by the way, by doing that, we've created a movement in the whole region to lower deforestation, all right? So the other products that are online, of course, ready to enact are really also related to office-related public procurement. Until that happens, then it will be more mandatory products that will come on. But like I said, it's early stage for us in terms of measurement. But Korea is the pioneering country that is doing it right. Okay.
Thank you, Isabella. Since we have reached to the final of our session, so I would like to thank you very much for all of our panelists. And I hope this discussion gives you idea on how the procurement policies in your own context can not only drive the sustainability, but also the account for as the tangible contribution to the net zero. And now I would like to return the floor to our main moderator, Dr. Nan, please.
Yes. So thank you so much. And I would like to remind all of us to check the chat box because our panelists kindly give their responses to the remaining issues, and as well as they share a lot of useful material. So please take your time to look at that. And here comes to today's end of our webinars. So the concluding remarks will be presented shortly by our co-chair, Sanjay, please.
Thank you, Nan. It has really been a great, the webinar, and the kind of, information we gathered in the 90 minutes is really mind-boggling, right? Various perspectives from, various parts of the world, from industry, academia, industry association, business councils, right? So many perspectives in 99 minutes. But some of the things were clearly, was clear-cut, right? One was that GPP is a great tool to address climate mitigations and help country achieve net zero goals. This emerged from, all the speakers, they had an unequivocal view on this. So, and the countries have expectation. It's not that country they don't have expectation, and countries are adopting GPP practices. But in the very beginning, Dr. Farhat mentioned that there is a gap, in the ambition and real implementation. And in order to fill some of those gaps, many of the the shortcomings which we which we found out during the discussion, like the methodology, tools, and legal provisions, right? Those were also discussed during the session very well, right? And I noted that many of the speakers focused on the importance of reviewing the standards, reviewing the building codes as per the available low carbon building materials which are currently available, which were not there 5 or 10 years back when the building standards were developed or building codes were developed, right? And also a great tool coming from the GCCA on the the low carbon rating. That is also very important tool, and which could be integrated in the public procurement as well as the private procurement. So lots of things are happening, and I also saw a lot of discussion happening in the chat group, right? That was also amazing. Discussion focusing on the circular economy and the low carbon procurement, then also on the different sectors and various others issues, and speakers saying and responding to the questions which are coming in the the chat box. So we have come, every good thing has to come to the end. So I thanks all the participants for the engaging conversation and being with us for this 90 minutes, right? And thank you all to all speakers, right, who shared their view, and those view and those collaboration which many of the speakers they spoke during the webinar, that will be carried forward. We are committed, Switch Asia is committed to that. And last but not the least, thank you, Nan, for wonderful coordinating all the discussion during the webinar with all the speakers and also the participant. And thank you, Elodie and Anne, for leading the panel discussions. So thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Right. Thank you, Sanjay. And actually, thank you for you all. Yeah, we are so grateful for your expertise and engagement. And we hope to see you again in our next webinar. So please stay in touch, and then we can build the community of practitioners together. Yes. Thank you, and have a nice day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.